Hello everybody, my name is Xodas and welcome to Xodas Gaming. In this video we're going to cover the level 100 tier talents for Frost Death Knights, and we're going to basically read all three abilities and we're going to decide which one is the best choice based off of what you need in certain situations, what could be best for you in certain situations, and overall how the abilities work. So let's get started with my favorite, Necrotic Plague. Necrotic Plague is a passive ability, a powerful disease that deals 120 Shadow Frost damage per stack every 2 seconds for 30 seconds. Each time it deals damage, it gains 1 stack and infects another nearby enemy within 8 yards if possible. You gain 2 runic power whenever a target infected with Necrotic Plague attempts to attack you. Replaces Blood Plague and Frost Fever and is applied by any ability which applied either. This effect cannot be refreshed, it gains 1 stack instead. That sounds very interesting. Now on to Defile. It costs 1 Unholy rune, has a 30-yard range, it's an instant cast ability, and has a 30-second cooldown. Defiles the ground targeted by the Death Knight. Every 1 second, if there are any enemies standing in the defile, it deals 1,739 Shadow Frost damage to them, and grows in radius and damage by 2.5%. Enemies standing in your defile deal 10% less damage to you, replaces Death and Decay. Okay, and then Breath of Sindrigosa. 15 runic power plus 15 runic power per second. It's an instant cast ability and has a 2-minute cooldown. Continuously deals 5,266 Shadow Frost damage every 1 second to enemies in a cone in front of you within 12 yards. And affects them with Marcus Sindrigosa for 6 seconds. Deals reduced damage to secondary targets. You will continue breathing until cancelled or runic power is exhausted. Marcus Sindrigosa causes you to be healed for 10% of spell damage dealt by afflicted enemies. Okay, so that's all pretty sweet. Those are 3 pretty sweet abilities. So let's kind of break them down and kind of go over what they do. Necrotic Plague obviously does a okay amount of damage. It's definitely the least amount of damage ability out of all 3 of them. But what's nice about it is it gives you 2 runic power whenever a target infected with Necrotic Plague attempts to attack you. 2 runic power doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about it, especially on rogues, every auto attack, every ability, every spell, all that stuff gives you runic power. Necrotic Plague is wonderful to use against people in duels. It's wonderful to use in 2v2, especially if you're running double DPS, just because you will get so much runic power, and if they do a hard swap, or if you have to 1v2 or 1v1, then you get so much more healing, because obviously if you're 1v1ing or you're getting focused, you're taking a lot of hits. And if you're taking a lot of hits, you're getting fed a lot of runic power, and if you're getting fed a lot of runic power, that's more runic power to throw into Frost Strikes, that's more runic power to throw into conversions, and that equals more obliterates, and it's just a never-ending cycle. So Necrotic Plague is definitely the way to go in compositions in Arena where you're going to be taking a lot of damage. It's great in RPGs because the spread damage is absolutely phenomenal. It's great in 2s because, well, in 2s you never really know, it's just all kinds of weird. I recommend Necrotic Plague for 2s 100% just because we'll cover it some more. So Necrotic Plague is very much a very good kind of general passive ability. You can't really go wrong with Necrotic Plague. Now let's go on to Defile. This is definitely the worst of the 3 abilities, and the reason being is, yes, it does the medium damage out of this group. It does, not great, but not bad. But and sure, it also gives you 10% less damage dealt to you when you're standing in it, which is a huge amount of damage difference, just so you know. But the thing is that anyone with half of a brain is going to simply pull you out of it. You're going to get Death Gripped out, you're going to get Kited out, you're going to get Explosive Trapped out, you're going to get Feared out. No one's going to be stupid enough to sit in your Defile and hit you. And if they are, then you're playing below 1500 CR, and it doesn't really matter. You're below 1500 CR. I could see Defile working in arenas past, up to 1500, and then past that, no way. It's just not going to work. I can imagine it working in RPGs. It does a decent amount of damage, it grows in size, but Necrotic Plague is still more spread pressure, and it will put more pressure on the enemies. It also feeds you damage, because think of all those boomkins. If they're infected with Necrotic Plague, every single dot, every single starfall, every AoE ability that it's going to hit you is going to feed you. Think of it like that. Necrotic Plague, I think, is a must-have for RBGs. The only time I run anything else in RBGs is when it's like a flag capture map, in which case, you know, you need to really quickly focus down a flag carrier. Then Breath of Sindrigosa is useful, which we'll go into now. Breath of Sindrigosa is a pretty interesting ability. This is what we're going to be focusing on for the bulk of the video. I am both strongly against and strongly pro Breath of Sindrigosa. It is very much a double-edged sword. It will screw you up if you use it wrong. It's on a 2-minute cooldown, which is a pretty hefty cooldown for a Death Knight. But let's go over the cons real quick before we go to the pros. The number one con is, in order to keep this up for any decent amount of time, for it to really do any decent amount of damage, it's really noticeable and worth taking the talent, you'd have to use a lot of cooldowns that you really shouldn't have to use in this manner. In this case, what I'm talking about is using Empower Rune Weapon to get more runic power. What I typically do is I build up my runic power to full. Once it's full, I pop my Burst, I pop Sindrigosa, and I just spam my Obliterates. The moment I get down to about 25% runic power, I pop Empower Rune Weapon and spam more Obliterates. Typically that right there will kill a healer, in most cases. But at the same time, once it's all over, once that Breath of Sindrigosa is gone, you're drained of runes, so you have no runes. You have no runic power. So what does that equal? No runic power, no runes. Well, that means you gotta wait 8 seconds for your runes to come off cooldown. So that gives you essentially a 8-second empty spot in your rotation. This is what I mean by it being a double-edged sword. It is absolutely amazing if you time it properly with procs, and you use it on a vulnerable healer or a vulnerable DPS, and your partner is bursting as well. And that's why I recommend this for 3s. I do not think Breath of Sindrigosa has any place in 2s. The reason being is that in 2s, it's very much easy. It's very, very, very easy for people to just kite you, easy for people to CC you, easy for all kinds of stuff like that to happen. But in 3s, it's a little less likely. And that's what a lot of people have issues with Breath of Sindrigosa, is they think, oh, you're just going to get CC'd. Honestly, if you pop AMS while you're using Breath of Sindrigosa, which covers you for 8 seconds, you're doing fine. You're not going to get CC'd. Other than that, just make sure you're ready to hit that trinket and you're good. I mean, we have 4 trinkets. You can throw one out, you know, for Breath of Sindrigosa uptime. But in 2s, it's just not worth it. You're just going to get kited. It's super easy to get CC'd, and yeah, it's just a waste of time. Do not use it in 2s whatsoever. The only time I would maybe use it in 2s is on like a Resto Shaman or on a double DPS comp. Other than that, do not run it. In 3s, I don't recommend using it on Resto Druids at all. Don't use it on Resto Druids, don't use it on Monks, because they'll just kite you and ruin it, and you just wasted a 2-minute cooldown. If you are going up against a Monk or a Resto Druid healer comp, then depending on your composition, you might not want to, you know, get on a healer, and you might want to get on a DPS. Well, as long as it's a melee DPS, you're fine. But if it's like a hunter, or a mage, or anything that has a lot of mobility or a lot of escapes, you're screwed. Don't even do it. Breath of Sindrigosa is great on melee players, it is great on priests, it is great on shamans, it's great on any healer that has low mobility or any class or any damage spec which is melee. And that is how I recommend to use Breath of Sindrigosa. If you don't use it in those recommended ways, it will be a wasted talent, and so what I recommend is once you enter the arena, look at what you have to go up against, and just kind of tell yourself, am I going to get kited? How easy are they going to be to CC me? You know, what are my options here? And obviously, using kind of like the guide that I point out to you here, decide if you need to run Necrotic Plague or Breath of Sindrigosa. That is my opinion on Breath of Sindrigosa, that is my opinion on these other 2 abilities, and that is how they all work and how you should be using them. I hope this helped you. If you want to see more World of Warcraft content, please leave a like, please subscribe, and if you have any questions, any suggestions, anything like that you want to leave for me, please leave so in the comments below. I love to read your comments and answer them, and I'll catch you guys later.